Christmas morning in Portland should smell like cinnamon and fresh coffee, and the kind of warmth that seeps into your bones after a long year of working too hard. But on this particular morning, as I sat cross-legged on my parents' hardwood floor, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the artificial pine scent drifting from their perfectly decorated tree, the only thing I could smell was betrayal. My sister Chelsea stood in the middle of the living room, twirling a set of shiny BMW keys around her manicured fingers like she was a teenager who just gotten her first car instead of a 32-year-old woman who had never held down a steady job in her entire life. The metal caught the twinkling lights from the Christmas tree as she pirouetted, squealing with a delight that seemed almost obscene in its excessiveness. My father beamed at her with the kind of unfiltered pride I had spent my entire life trying to earn but never quite managed to receive. My mother clasped her hands beneath her chin like she was witnessing some kind of divine miracle unfold before her very eyes. Through the window, I could see it sitting in the driveway, a glossy white BMW that gleamed like a testament to parental devotion, complete with an enormous red bow that probably cost more than what they had spent on my entire Christmas combined. Meanwhile, I stared at the object resting in my lap, a plastic piggy bank shaped like a cartoon character from a children's show I had outgrown 25 years ago. The price tag they had forgotten to remove still dangled from its ear, reading $1.99. My mother gestured toward the small rubber stopper on the bottom of the piggy bank with an encouraging smile that made my stomach turn. My fingers felt completely numb as I complied with her unspoken request, and two crisp $1 bills fluttered out onto my lap like the punchline to a joke that only I didn't find funny. My father announced with a dismissive wave of his hand that it was the start of my future home fund, honey, and that I was always so responsible with money, not like some people. He winked at Chelsea, who pretended to look offended while clutching her car keys to her chest. The silence that followed stretched between us like taffy being pulled in opposite directions until my mother rushed to fill it with her explanations. Chelsea needed reliable transportation for her new graphic design clients, she insisted. Those artsy types expected a certain image, you know? Chelsea dropped onto the couch beside me, her expensive perfume clouding my senses and making it hard to breathe. She patted my knee with patronizing gentleness and told me not to worry, that she would drive me around whenever I needed because my little Toyota must be on its last legs by now. The Toyota that had carried me through 7 hours of mountain passes just yesterday. The Toyota I had paid off myself 3 years ago without any help from anyone. The Toyota that was more reliable than any relationship in this entire room. Suddenly, I could not breathe. 34 years of moments exactly like this one crystallized in my mind with perfect and terrible clarity. This was not some random anomaly or unfortunate oversight. This was the pattern of my entire existence, laid bare in a plastic piggy bank and 2 crumpled dollar bills. Just that very morning, before any presents were opened, and before I knew what awaited me under that tree, I had carefully wrapped their gifts with the kind of attention and care that I brought to everything in my life. A leather briefcase for my father that had cost me 2 full weeks of my salary. A silver bracelet my mother had admired in a Seattle boutique window 6 months earlier, which I had secretly returned to purchase the very next day. A professional camera lens that Chelsea had casually mentioned wanting during one of our rare phone conversations, the kind of equipment that serious photographers use, and that cost more than my monthly rent. All of these presents had been purchased by setting aside a little bit from each paycheck for months, sacrificing dinners out and new clothes and all the small pleasures that make life bearable, because I wanted so desperately to show them that I loved them. I had rehearsed my announcement during the entire 7-hour drive down from Seattle, practicing the words at every rest stop and every gas station and every mile marker that brought me closer to what I foolishly believed might finally be the Christmas that changed everything. Senior structural engineer, the promotion I had earned through countless nights and weekends of extra work, designing buildings that would stand for generations after everyone in this room had turned to dust. I had imagined their faces lighting up with pride, finally seeing me as something more than just Chelsea's responsible older sister who could always be counted on to handle things without complaint. Maybe this Christmas would finally be different. I had whispered to myself so many times during that long drive that the words had become a kind of prayer. My hands trembled as I placed the piggy bank on the coffee table between us, the plastic making a hollow sound against the glass that seemed to echo through the entire room. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else entirely, someone who was watching this scene unfold from very far away. I walked up the familiar stairs without running, passing the wall of family photos where Chelsea's face dominated every single frame. Chelsea's first steps, Chelsea's dance recitals, Chelsea's graduations, Chelsea's art shows, with my face appearing only occasionally in the background like an afterthought. The bathroom door closed behind me with a soft click, and I twisted the lock with fingers that would not stop shaking. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, eyes too dry, face too composed, like a mask that had been carefully constructed over 34 years of practice. I pressed my palms against the cold marble counter and waited for the tears that would not come. Instead, the pressure built in my chest like concrete hardening around my lungs, making each breath feel like an accomplishment. People talk about heartbreak like it is something abstract, something poetic and beautiful in its tragedy. But it is not abstract at all. I felt each chamber of my heart contracting painfully, felt my blood struggling to push through vessels that seemed to be narrowing with every passing second. My sternum ached like someone had pressed a knee against it and was slowly increasing the pressure. This is what dying feels like, I thought to myself. Not dramatic or spectacular, just this slow and steady diminishing until there is nothing left at all. The night stretched endlessly as I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at a ceiling I had memorized decades ago while listening to Chelsea's laughter floating up from downstairs. She and my parents were planning her first road trip in the new car, discussing routes and destinations and all the adventures that awaited her behind the wheel of a $50,000 vehicle she had done absolutely nothing to earn. At 2:17 in the morning, according to the glowing numbers on my old alarm clock, I finally sat up and made a decision that would change the entire trajectory of my life. I packed quickly, taking only what truly mattered: the faded stuffed bear my grandmother had given me before she passed away, the photo album from my college years filled with pictures of the person I had been before life beat the hope out of me, and the small wooden box containing my first professional blueprint from the day I became a real engineer. The expensive gifts I had given my family over the years stayed exactly where they were, scattered throughout a house that had never truly felt like home. Those presents were never really about gratitude anyway. They were about a desperate and futile attempt to purchase the love that should have been freely given. The house was completely silent as I carried my suitcase down the stairs, each step feeling like a small act of revolution against everything I had been taught to accept. My house key lay cold in my palm for a long moment before I placed it deliberately on the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker that would brew automatically in just 3 hours. They had made their choice about who I was and what I was worth to them. Now I was finally making mine. The streetlights blurred into watery halos as I navigated the empty highways out of Portland, my Toyota's engine humming a steady rhythm that felt like encouragement. The dashboard clock read 3:42 in the morning, still technically Christmas Day, though it felt like an entirely different lifetime from the one I had been living just hours before. My windshield wipers battled against the thickening snow that had begun to fall while Bing Crosby crooned about white Christmases from the radio like some kind of cruel cosmic joke. I twisted the volume knob until his voice faded to merciful silence. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," I whispered to the empty passenger seat, my voice breaking on the word merry in a way that surprised me. The irony of it all burned like acid in my throat. Through Portland's southern outskirts and into the open darkness beyond, my Toyota's heater struggled valiantly against the December chill that seemed to be seeping through the windows and into my bones. This car had carried me faithfully through college and first jobs and promotions, accumulating 200,000 miles without ever once complaining about mountain passes or tight parking spots or the weight of my broken dreams. Unlike the gleaming BMW sitting in my parents' driveway with its ridiculous red bow, my car had actually earned its place in my life through years of reliable service and quiet loyalty. Around 6 in the morning, just as the first hints of gray light began to soften the darkness on the horizon, my phone buzzed against the center console. I glanced down to see my mother's face lighting up the screen with an incoming call, and my heart lurched with a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she was calling to apologize, or to ask if I was safe, or to say the words I had been waiting my entire life to hear. But the voicemail she left contained none of those things. Instead, she simply asked if I had remembered to pay the electric bill for the cabin before I left Seattle, the vacation cabin they had bought for weekend getaways that Chelsea used exclusively for her Instagram photo shoots, while I had never been invited to visit even once. A semi-truck passed me on the highway, spraying a wall of gray slush across my windshield that blinded me completely. For 3 terrifying seconds, I drove through nothing but darkness, while my wipers fought desperately to clear enough space for me to see the road ahead. My hands shook against the steering wheel as the world slowly came back into focus, and with that clarity came a flood of memories that I had spent years trying to suppress. My 5th birthday party materialized in my mind with painful precision. Chelsea had received a princess-themed celebration with professional decorators and pony rides and a 3-tier castle cake, with 30 neighborhood kids wearing color-coordinated party hats. My birthday party, the following year, consisted of a grocery store sheet cake, 2 friends from kindergarten whose mothers felt sorry for me, and party supplies from the dollar bin at the drugstore. Your sister needs the social stimulation, my father had explained when I worked up the courage to ask why Chelsea's parties were so much bigger and better than mine. You are more independent, he said, as if that were a compliment rather than an excuse. Independent, their code word for you do not need us, you do not deserve the same effort, you can survive on scraps while your sister feasts at the table. High school graduation came flooding back next, the day I stood on stage as valedictorian and delivered a carefully crafted speech about persistence and dreams to an auditorium full of families celebrating their children's achievements. But when I looked out at the family section, the seats reserved for my parents sat conspicuously empty because Chelsea's junior varsity soccer team had an away game that apparently could not be missed. We will watch the recording, my mother had promised with the casual indifference of someone making a commitment they had no intention of keeping. That VHS tape sat unwrapped on my dresser until the day I left for college, a physical reminder of just how little my accomplishments meant to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Your sister needs the encouragement, my mother had explained. You always succeed without our help. Without help, their code for you are on your own, you have always been on your own, and you always will be. The college years flashed through my mind like a movie being played on fast forward, as highway signs counted down the miles to the California border. Working 25 hours every single week at the campus bookstore and cafeteria, while also carrying a maximum course load, so I could graduate early and escape the prison of student debt as quickly as possible. Stretching my student loans and scholarships until they screamed for mercy, while Chelsea explored artistic inspiration across Europe on our parents' dime. Sending postcards from Paris and Barcelona and Florence that I taped to my dorm room wall like evidence of a life I would never be allowed to live. Your sister needs to find herself, my father had insisted during one of our rare phone calls when I made the mistake of asking why I could not have even a fraction of what they were spending on Chelsea's extended vacation. You have always known exactly who you are. Known who I am, their code for you do not deserve exploration, you do not get to wander or wonder or discover who you might become if someone believed in you. My phone buzzed again, this time with my father's name on the screen. I let it ring until voicemail caught it, unable to bear whatever justification or accusation or manipulation might be waiting on the other end. The first hint of dawn lightened the eastern horizon as tears finally began to blur the oncoming headlights into golden streaks that looked almost beautiful through the water in my eyes. I pulled onto the shoulder with my hazards blinking and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I had just done. The patterns of my entire life crystallized with sudden and devastating clarity in that moment. My father controlling all the money in our family, withholding from me while bankrolling every single one of Chelsea's whims and dreams and desires. My mother manipulating emotions with surgical precision, making me feel selfish and ungrateful for wanting even the smallest scraps of attention or recognition. Together, they had created the perfect system of favoritism, one parent handling the financial disparity while the other maintained emotional control, both working in tandem to ensure that I always knew exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. My phone rang again, cutting through the silence of the empty highway. But this time it was not family. It was Monica Perez, my college roommate, who had become my lifelong friend and the closest thing to a sister I had ever truly known. "Where are you?" her voice demanded through the car's Bluetooth speakers, warm and worried and wonderfully real. "Somewhere in southern Oregon," I heard myself say, my voice sounding hollow and unrecognizable even to my own ears. "Heading south." "To where?" she asked. "I do not know," I admitted, and the honesty of that statement felt like the first true thing I had said in years. Monica's response came without hesitation or judgment, just pure and unconditional friendship offered freely in my moment of greatest need. "Come to San Francisco," she said firmly. "Stay with me for as long as you need. Family does not treat family the way they have treated you, and it is time someone reminded you that you deserve better." Monica knew the truth because she had witnessed the evidence firsthand during our college years together. She had seen the packages that arrived for me containing only practical necessities, while Chelsea received boxes of designer clothes and expensive gifts. She had been there during the holiday breaks when I stayed alone in the dormitory because flying home was supposedly too expensive, even as our parents took Chelsea to ski in Aspen and vacation in Maui. "I cannot impose on you like this," I started to say, the old patterns of self-denial rising up automatically like muscle memory. "Stop," Monica interrupted, her voice turning firm in a way that brooked no argument. "You have spent your entire life being the helper, the responsible one, the person everyone else leans on without ever asking if you need support. Let someone help you for once in your life." The words cracked something open inside my chest that had been sealed shut for as long as I could remember. Help, such a simple concept, just 4 letters arranged in a particular order, yet completely foreign to my experience of family life. In my family, help only ever flowed in one direction, toward Chelsea, toward my parents, toward anyone and everyone except me. "Okay," I whispered, surprising myself with the word. The single syllable felt like an act of revolution. "Text me your location every hour so I know you are safe," Monica instructed. "Drive carefully and take breaks when you need them. I am making up the guest room right now, and I will have coffee waiting when you arrive." The call ended, and I eased back onto the highway with my wipers still clearing fresh snow from the windshield. For the first time since leaving Portland, my shoulders lowered slightly from their defensive hunch near my ears. By 7:30 that morning, I crossed the California state line and felt something shift in my chest like tectonic plates finally settling after an earthquake. The "Welcome to California" sign gleamed in the early sunlight like a promise of new beginnings. My phone screen showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, all from people who had never bothered to reach out this urgently when I was actually present in their lives. With deliberate and intentional motions, I turned off notifications from my mother, my father, and Chelsea. The silence that followed felt weightier than any accusation they could have hurled at me, but also infinitely more peaceful. 3 weeks after that Christmas morning escape, I found myself curled up in Monica's San Francisco guest room while my phone vibrated against the nightstand for what felt like the 100th time. My father's number appeared on the screen again, his 13th call of the morning alone, and I counted to 10 before silencing it and adding his attempt to the growing cemetery of voicemails I refused to resurrect from digital death. The first week after I left, their messages had been filled with confusion. "Where are you? What happened? Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" The second week brought what they called concern, though it sounded more like irritation wrapped in parental authority. Now, in week 3, their communications had evolved into something much darker: manipulation and threats disguised as worry, designed to drag me back into the role I had spent my entire life trying to escape. My father's latest voicemail thundered through my phone speaker when I finally worked up the courage to check my messages. "If you do not return this car immediately," he bellowed, "I will report it stolen to the police. This childish behavior has gone on long enough, and I will not tolerate it anymore." He was talking about my Toyota, the car with my name clearly printed on the title and 7 years of paid-off receipts sitting in my file cabinet. I crushed Monica's throw pillow against my stomach and swallowed the acid that rose in my throat at the audacity of his threat. My mother's message followed his, employing an entirely different but equally manipulative strategy. "The doctor says my blood pressure is dangerously high Because of all the stress you are causing this family, she whimpered in her most fragile voice. Is that what you want, Iris? For me to end up in the hospital because you are being selfish? I deleted both messages without responding, though my finger hovered over the callback button longer than I cared to admit to myself. The walls of Monica's guest room were painted a soft terracotta that caught the morning light and warmed the space in ways my Seattle apartment never had. On the borrowed dresser, my laptop displayed an email I had rewritten 14 times before finally finding the courage to send. Dear Mr. Sanderson, it began. I am writing to formally request a transfer to the San Francisco office, effective as soon as possible. My finger clicked send before I could reconsider or talk myself out of yet another opportunity. No family connections pulling strings behind the scenes. No favors called in from people who owed me nothing. Just my work record, my professional reputation, and my worth as a structural engineer speaking for themselves. 3 hours later, the approval arrived in my inbox. Just like that, with no drama and no complications. As if I had always been entirely capable of creating my own path through life without anyone's permission or assistance. The apartment that would become my first true home was small, only 650 square feet, with a kitchenette barely wide enough to accommodate a refrigerator. But the windows faced west and caught the afternoon sunshine in a way that made everything feel possible. I signed the lease by nightfall and bought only the essentials: a futon for sleeping, a lamp for reading, and a small desk for working. The emptiness of the space felt intentional rather than impoverished, like a blank canvas waiting to be filled with a life I actually wanted to live. Monica dragged me to a community center pottery class the following Saturday, insisting that I needed something in my life that was not work or therapy. I protested until my hands sank into the cool clay for the first time, and I felt it yield and resist simultaneously beneath my fingers. The instructor, a woman with silver hair and paint-spattered overalls, stood behind me and whispered advice that seemed to apply to far more than just pottery. Do not force it, she murmured. Listen to what it wants to become instead of trying to impose your will. By the end of that first class, I had created a small and imperfect bowl with uneven edges and visible fingerprints embedded in its surface. It was hideous and beautiful and entirely mine in a way that nothing had ever been before. The first video call with my family came 4 weeks after that Christmas morning escape, and I answered on the third ring while steeling myself against the familiar surge of guilt that their faces always triggered in my nervous system. Where have you been? My father demanded immediately, his face filling the screen and already flushed red with indignation. Your mother has been worried absolutely sick about you. Behind him, my mother dabbed at her eyes with strategic precision, though they remained suspiciously dry despite her theatrical efforts. San Francisco, I answered with a calmness that surprised even me. I transferred to a new office here. Without discussing it with us first, my mother interjected, pushing into frame beside my father. How could you possibly be so inconsiderate of our feelings? The old familiar pull tugged at my chest. Apologize, placate, smooth things over, make everything right at the expense of your own needs. But my therapist's words echoed in my mind with crystal clarity. Your feelings are valid and their reactions belong to them, not to you. I needed space, I said instead of apologizing. Space from what? My father barked. From family, from responsibility, from being a grown-up. From feeling invisible, I replied, genuinely surprised by the steadiness that had crept into my voice. From being valued less than Chelsea. From constantly trying to earn love that should have been freely given all along. 6 months after that Christmas morning, my apartment had transformed into something that actually felt like a reflection of who I was becoming. Pottery lined the windowsills, each piece more refined than the last, charting my progress from absolute beginner to someone with actual skill and vision. A proper bed had replaced the futon, and the promotion to senior project manager had come with a raise that finally ended any lingering anxiety about money. On my bookshelf sat the plastic piggy bank from that terrible morning, but now I had filled it with crisp $2 bills, one for each week of freedom I had claimed for myself. Not as punishment or bitter remembrance, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest betrayals reveal the largest truths about who people really are. The ivory envelope containing my cousin Vanessa's wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 full days before I finally acknowledged its existence. My name was written in swooping calligraphy, Iris Collins, with no +1 indicated, Just me expected to return to the fold unaccompanied and presumably humbled by my months of absence. My therapist asked what I was thinking when I told her about the invitation, her office chair creaking as she leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "I am going," I answered, surprising both of us with the certainty in my voice. "But I am going on my own terms." I had already booked a room at the Hilton 4 blocks from the venue, maintaining my independence despite my father's increasingly desperate voicemails insisting that I stay at the family's rental house with everyone else. The boundary itself was the message I needed to send. When Chelsea's texts started arriving with unprecedented frequency, suddenly we were best friends who needed sister time before the wedding madness. I recognized the manipulation for what it was. She wanted something from me, probably a ride from the airport, or money, or the return of the old Iris who had carried her emotional baggage alongside her actual luggage for 34 years. The relatives had been enlisted as flying monkeys, each one reaching out with their own version of the same script about how families need to stick together and forgiveness is divine. They were coordinating their campaign to bring me back into compliance, but I was no longer the woman who could be guilted into submission. I was terrified, I admitted to my therapist during our final session before the wedding. But I was also ready to face whatever awaited me in Portland with my spine straight and my boundaries firmly in place. One full year after that Christmas morning, sunshine spilled across the hardwood floors of my San Francisco apartment as friends gathered around a table that actually belonged to me. The scent of rosemary and sage from the roasting turkey mingled with genuine laughter, not the strained and performative kind that used to echo through my parents' house, but real joy shared between people who had chosen to be in my life. Monica raised her glass in a toast, her dark curls catching the light from the window as she praised me for building bridges better than anyone she knew, both in my professional work and in my personal relationships. Elliot's fingers brushed mine under the table, his touch sending a steady current of warmth through my entire body. He was an environmental engineer who valued sustainability in buildings and in relationships, and he understood me in ways that my family never had. When he first asked me to coffee 6 months earlier, I had almost declined out of the old habit of self-denial, but my therapist called it progress when I finally said yes to something good. Chelsea's face appeared on my phone screen during our monthly video call, a boundary we had established after the confrontation at Vanessa's wedding when I had finally laid out 30 years of evidence documenting exactly how differently we had been treated. She looked different now, no designer watch, no expensive highlights, no entitled smirk. Working 2 jobs after the BMW was repossessed had given her a new perspective on money and on life, along with shadows under her eyes that told the truth about her struggles. "Dad is 90 days sober today," she told me quietly. "The AA meetings are helping. He is different when he is not drinking." I nodded, not yet ready to fully process that revelation or what it might mean for our future relationship. My mother was volunteering at a community center now, apparently finding purpose in helping others rather than controlling her daughters. "They asked about me," Chelsea said, but not in the old manipulative way. Later, when the guests had gone home and Elliot was helping with the last of the dishes, I stepped onto my balcony and looked out at the city I now called home. San Francisco Bay stretched before me with lights from the bridges reflecting on the dark water, and in the distance, I could see buildings I had helped design standing in silhouette against the night sky. The plastic piggy bank sat visible through the window behind me, no longer a symbol of what I had lacked, but a reminder of what I had found when I finally claimed the courage to value myself first. Worth is not something you earn through usefulness or good behavior or sacrifice, I whispered to the city lights. It is something you claim by knowing what you will accept and what you absolutely will not. Elliot wrapped a blanket around my shoulders against the December chill and asked if I was having deep thoughts. "Just grateful," I answered, leaning into his warmth and feeling truly at peace for the first time in my entire life. Sometimes the greatest gift is not what others give you. It is realizing that you deserved better all along and finally having the strength to go find it for yourself.